Hello. Nice to see some nice friendly faces up there. Just want to welcome you. If you don't know me, my name is Mandy. I think I know quite a few of you coming in. Catherine, Patsy, it's lovely to see you. So I am team leader for the Multicultural Mixers and very fortunate to have some very talented people in my team. But before we go on to move over to Irene and Boone, who are going to teach us all about bread tonight, I just want to let you know that if you haven't seen it before, we have the Black Limited Edition Thermomix as an option. Sorry, I got distracted. As an option at the moment, which is a pretty beautiful thing. Luckily, us team leaders have all been able to have one on our bench for a little bit of time. And there's certainly, I can send you pictures and photos and things of it, and a little recording if you're interested in that. The classic white, so the black one comes with 2 black thermoservers at the moment. That's the current deal. And if you're after the classic white, it comes with a 2.6 litre thermoserver. So those are our current options. And if you're interested in, you think this looks like fun tonight and you'd love to join us, then we would love to have you. So please get in touch. But without further ado, seeing as you're all here to see Irene and Boone teach us about bread rather than listen to me rabbiting on, which I'm quite good at, then we will move straight over to Irene and Boone, and they are going to teach us all about making bread. So just a little reminder for those of you who don't know this, Irene was Thermo Star for this year. She just won that a month ago, which meant that she was top Thermomix producing wonderful things consultant in the country. So we're extremely lucky to have her in our team and for her to be able to share her amazing knowledge with you tonight. And Boone is also going to show you something with a little St. Patrick's twist as well, because it's St. Patrick's Day. All right, moving over to you girls.
Hi.
Hello.
That's as St. Patty as I get today, my little green satchel. So today we're making focaccia, and Boone has made some beautiful pandan coconut scrolls, which we will show in a little while. So I'm going to do this a little bit back to front. I'm going to show you, I've basically made the dough. I've let that proof, and then once it's proofed the first time, I've then moved it into this tray. This is courtesy of Boone. She's got some Italian customers who've actually given her or brought back this special tray from, what region did he tell you?
Portuguese, something like that.
Somebody else will know that better. So this is a genuine focaccia tray. So we're going to take that for a test run tonight. So essentially this is now proved the second time. So I'm just going to swap cameras. As I said, we'll do this a little bit back to front just so you guys can, we can get this in the oven and baked before the end of the class, essentially. Okay, so I'm just going to use, in fact, I need a bit of water. Sorry, I'm going to wet my hands slightly because this is quite a wet dough, so they stick. So I'm just making, just a little bit more water. Excellent. It's good having an assistant. Should have her here more often. You can use oil to do this as well. And we don't want to knock out all those beautiful pockets of air, but we want the gorgeous oils that I'm going to pour over the top of this to sit in here. And that's where you get all that crispy flavour from the focaccia. Now, we're going a little bit Greek Italian today. So in those little dents, I'm going to do this off camera so Boone can move on to her dish. But essentially, in those little rivets, I'm going to do a combination of olives. I'm also going to squeeze in some chunks of feta. Just to give you an idea, I'll come and show you before I put it in the oven. And what I've also got are a few sprigs, so rosemary, which I'm going to pop in and around it as well. Now you can put in whatever you like. Sun-dried tomatoes are great. But I figured Mum will eat this. So I'm just using flavours we like. So I'll keep going with this, and Boone will start her pandan coconut rolls.
Okay. I'm not going to focus on myself. I'll start immediately with the bread. The difference, this pandan coconut roll is basically an Asian bread recipe. And the difference with Asian bread is that we usually use milk instead of water. And it just makes it softer, and you use butter. So you get really soft texture, which, like, you know, if you go to Bread Talk and places like that, that's how their bread is being done. So a bit of a green with St. Patrick's Day. So with a scroll, the way you do scroll is that you get your dough into a rectangular shape. Now, like all bread, the more you proof it, Irene believes in minimum 3 proving sessions. I just do 2 usually. I'm too impatient. I don't have time to wait for 3 rounds, because each round, depending on the weather, today is quite a warm day, so it was nice. If it's cold winter's day, it takes quite a while to get it proved to the level of, you know, what do you call it? Rising that, you know, you really want. Now, when you do scrolls, you want to do the side of the dough a little bit thinner, because otherwise you always end up with the side really thick, a lot of bread, so to speak, a lot of dough, and then the other bits are not so much. So all the edges always a bit thinner. So with this coconut pandan, all it is I had milk with pandan paste added to it to make it green. And then to do the coconut, this coconut, Mandy has a recipe. This coconut is mixed with butter, sugar. I add dark brown sugar to give it the brown color, but you don't have to if you don't want to use dark, you know, if you don't want it dark brown, basically. And sugar, again, you can add as much sugar as you like or as little sugar as you like. I try to reduce sugar because otherwise it is always way too sweet. All this dessert or whatever, you know, we do is always way too sweet. So spreading it all over. Again, it's your choice. You want to spread a lot or you want to fill it up to the max or just a little bit, doesn't matter. But of course, the more fillings you put in, the tastier. And don't forget the corners, the edge, because the last piece is always full of bread and not much fillings. So okay, and then the way you do the scroll is you literally just roll it up. You can roll it up as tight as you want, preferably tight so that when it's baked, it looks much nicer scroll than a very loose piece.
So Boone, just a question. Would you do a savoury filling in this sort of recipe or not?
You most certainly can. I always also, the other recipe I do is cheese and bacon. Cheese and bacon with tomato relish as the base. It's yummy. It's really, really nice. You can do any form of fillings that you like. So the other good thing is this, like when I roll it up, it's quite fat. And so if I cut them now, it's not, I don't get many pieces. So I just roll it out and make it thinner. Then I can have more pieces. But yes, you can certainly do savory and any fillings, literally any fillings of your choice. You want to make sure there is some moisture added to that filling so that the overall bread won't be too dry. The scrolls won't be too dry. So with the cheese and bacon, the tomato relish is good. With this, because there's butter with the coconut, so it won't be too dry either. Okay, so you see I have elongated, this roll. Now, what I tend to do is I just use my thumb as a measurement, all right? I mean, if you are fussy, you want to measure it carefully and, you know, so be it. But I want about 12 pieces. So about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I only get 11 pieces. I make it thinner again, a bit longer, and I will make it 12 pieces. Okay, so some pieces will be a bit bigger and some smaller, doesn't matter. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, then we'll put it into a tray. What's happened to the tray? Yeah. Now, I always line the tray because if you don't line it, it's very hard to take it out when it's all baked. So I line it and I always butter the side at the top here because it really makes the end result much nicer and much tastier.
So the butter's on the paper or the butter's underneath the paper?
On the paper. This one now, it looks a bit underneath because I did bake the previous loaf before, or rather the previous scrolls. So there was some slippage.
I'm going to steal the spotlight for a second. So that's the focaccia, olives, cheese, rosemary, tomatoes, whatever you like. That's going to go in the oven, 200 degrees.
Looks really nice here. Seeing the real thing.
And Boone, thank you for reusing.
That's what I said to Irene. I said, Mandy will be very pleased to hear we are reusing it. Now with bread, the closer you place them together, the better it is. They really support each other to rise nicely. And for something like this, it really doesn't matter. It's not the same size because you can always just push them next to each other. And if you have cut one a bit thicker than the other, no problems, just push it down. There you go. So I don't bother to egg wash or whatever wash with this. I let it proof and then I bake it. And after baking, I will brush and glaze it with maple syrup. So if you do that, bear in mind the recipe that Mandy posted, the recipe uses a lot of sugar. So I literally like half the sugar and then I glaze it with maple syrup and the end result is just as tasty. You don't need any sweeter than that.
Looks amazing, Boone. Thank you.
Okay.
Show them the finished ones.
All right. You show the finished ones. All right. This is what I did before. It's just like typical dough shows. We baked before and I actually baked it an hour ago. And if you look at it, hopefully the St. Patrick's color comes through a little bit. It's not as green as St. Patrick might like it, but here you go. And it's all coconut fill in it. And it's really, really quite yummy.
They're delicious. Can't wait.
That looks amazing. It almost good enough to make me turn to go back to gluten.
Over to Irene.
Almost. All right, we'll just swap cameras back. All right, we're going to take it away.
Oh, you doing this?
Yeah, no, don't need that now. All yours. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about ingredients as well, but I may as well show the focaccia. There's a couple of minutes that it needs to need. Mandy can maybe cover a few things off, but and I can talk about ingredients while we're at it. So when you're making bread, you need to use bread flour. So I know I've seen people use plain flour as a substitute, but essentially the amount of gluten in the flour there's a higher protein content in bread flour, often called baker's flour as well, and it gives you a bigger stretch. So you want that expansion and that stretchability in your dough, and you're going to get that with baker's or bread flour. If you use plain flour, you don't get as much. It's not that it won't work, it just won't rise as much. It'll be much flatter in terms of texture. So the recipe that I'm using is the focaccia. It is from the Everyday Cookbook. So it's from the green book that you get for TM6. It may even still be in the white. It may have come in the white version as well. Okay, so a couple of things you can do. So in this recipe and quite a few of the recipes, it says basically to pop your water in, add in your yeast, and then heat that up for 2 minutes at 37 degrees. I bypass that step by using tepid water. So just take the chill out of the water from the tap. That's the temperature I use, and I don't bother doing that two minute process. So in here, I've got my yeast, my flour. So it's 2 teaspoons of yeast. It's 500 grams of flour, 350 of water. Please. I've got some salt in there as well. We're just going to add in. Sorry, I'm just going to weigh in.
So it's in my bucket.
Oh, thanks for the bucket. So I've jumped to the bit where I'm about to knead. So what I can do is I can click on the little dots and I can come straight to my scales, because that's essentially, so I've made the recipe not that long ago. And I'm going to add in my 350. Thanks for my bucket. It's good having a partner in crime. Okay, so when I click on X, it takes me back to the recipe where it starts that kneading process. So you might need to take over here, Mandy.
Okay, all right. So just to clarify, those 3 little dots that are next to the left of the next button, they give you various options. So I don't know if you've ever come across a recipe and it might say 150 grams of onion and there are no scales. Look, honestly, an onion is between 150 and 180 grams. So I would just, you know, chop my onion in half and chuck it in. But if you want to be very precise, you go to those 3 little dots and you can get your scales, and then you click off and the scales go back. But also accessible through that spot there with those 3 little dots, you can go into preview mode. So that's reasonably new. And it means that you can have a look at the next steps. So if you're anything like me and you don't get all your ingredients ready up front, then I love that, because I can just go in there and say, oh, okay, I need to go and get that now. So I'm ready for the next step. The other thing you can get through there is a whole recipe preview. And then you can scroll down and look through the whole list of ingredients that are coming up in case you need to go and get those. And the last thing is, if you're, you know, partway through a recipe, like I made some muffins the other day, and part of the recipe is the ganache, and I wasn't making the ganache. So you can also use those 3 dots to get out of the recipe. So that's a quick little tip there. And I'm going to rely on Irene to tell me when they're done. She probably can't hear me, but all right. In the meantime, though, let me just check I've got the right thing behind here. I do. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is the recipe I believe that Irene is using. There were 2 focaccia recipes, but they're, oh, she's got a thumbs up. That's good. So here you go. It shows you its preparation time is 10 minutes, 2 hours 5. That's obviously allowing for rising. And as she said, she's missed out that she's didn't do the heating because she used tepid water. So that's the recipe. With all our recipes, you can come down here, you can look at the nutritional content. We've got the calories, the protein, the carbs, the fats, and it tells you useful items and tips and tricks. So yes, it's saying serve with dips. And I just think Irene's looks, you know, really spectacular to eat just by itself. You wouldn't need anything else with it. So that's basically that recipe. That's how you use, you can check for things on Cookie-Doo. If it's something that you decide, right, okay, I want to make it this week, you can go add to my week and we'll pop it in for, actually let's put it in for Monday. I don't think I've got anything in there yet. I can also add it to my shopping list as well. And if you're creating a bread collection, you can go add to collection. In here, I do have a bread collection. Just add it in there. So I can then come in here, I can find that bread collection. I've just got a few different recipes in here, but you can see that's the one I've just found. This is an amazing one we do at Christmas time, a favourite of my daughter's. And you can see there's some Chelsea buns. They're a little bit like scrolls and a whole lot of other things. There's, if you've seen Irene making bread before, she's certainly talked about this tiger effect on the rolls, and she can probably talk a little bit about that again. But there's lots of different options. You can do all sorts of different breads. I don't think it's in here, but there is a soda bread, which is obviously great for St. Patrick's Day, very Irish. But all sorts of bread recipes there. This is a good one too. So you can make a brunch bread, bit of fun to take away to a picnic. If I go into my week, then I'm going to find that bread. So we are doing, as a team, we're doing a gluten-free bread session or class on Sunday at 4. So I'm in the email I sent out after this, I will put the link for that if you're interested in that. But here's our focaccia there we put in for Monday. So that just shows you it went into the week. Here's my shopping list. Come to my ingredients. I know I've got yeast. I don't need to buy water. Baker's flour I'd need to get. The olive oil I've got the salt, I've got the thyme. So not much there. But if you can imagine, if you had a few recipes that you were collecting, you would have more left to buy. And, you know, things like peaches are great at this time of the year. So add those in, and you can then order your ingredients. It's not a very big shopping list, but just for example, you can go to Woolies online and you can order your ingredients when it comes up. You can also, if you've got sorry, I think my internet's just being really slow. But anyway, I promise you, it comes up, Woolworths online, and then you just add that to your cart. So that's a pretty easy thing to do. The other thing is, you can have the Cookie Do app on your phone, and exactly what we've done on here will turn up in the shopping list on there. Go shopping, click things off, super easy. Anyway, I think those girls are ready.
You're ready?
Yeah, so coming back to you.
Okay, so this dough is quite sticky, so you can see that from here. So what I find is the easiest way to get it out is I'm going to just go straight into a bowl. I'm literally going to take the base off and the blade's coming out with the dough. So it's come out pretty clean. But if you've got any bits around the bowl, you can obviously use a spatula to scrape that up. And it literally is one bit, so that's done pretty well. And then I use the scraper to remove a little bit of excess that's around the blade out into the side. Now, there is a temptation to add flour, which is a big no-no. A wet dough is fantastic. I do focaccias. It's quite a sticky dough. I'm trying to think what else I make that's quite sticky.
Brioche is sticky.
The brioche, yeah, the brioche can be quite stretchy with all the butter that goes in it. But basically, just do this, get it off. Got a beautiful wash cycle in the Thermomix, which I love. That goes back on. Pop it back into position. Pop it back on. Pour in your water and use the wash cycle, the dough cleaning cycle. Absolutely brilliant. So we'll do that. We'll do that later. But essentially, that dough is quite sticky. I'm just flattening it a little bit. Do grease the bowl a little slightly, and then cover it with some, sorry, Mandy, cling film. But I do reuse these. So I actually found a packet. They're like the shower caps that you get at when you stay at a hotel. And I just reuse them and reuse them. I actually bought a pack of 10, and I still got, still on the first one. That's my plastic cover, and I reuse it all the time. So, we do try and reuse. Now, you do need to cover it. So if you don't cover it, it's going to create a skin and dry out that dough, and you don't want that. So that's going to go in a warm spot. Probably just throw it outside because it's pretty warm outside at the moment. So that's going to proof for the first time. So we're going to talk a little bit about all the other bits that go in. So one thing I do is I do let my dough rise 3 times. With the focaccia, you probably don't need to do that. I certainly haven't done that tonight. So I've come home from work. I've let the dough proof the first time. I've then transferred it straight into that tray, let it do its second proof, and then I'm baking it. When I do a triple proof, to save me time, I use the overnight method. So essentially what that means is I let this rise, I then punch out all the air, I cover it again, and then that goes in the fridge. And despite being cold, it will ferment and it will rise overnight, and you will get, risen dough within the fridge, even though it's a colder temperature. It's just a much slower rise. That's my second rise essentially in the fridge. I'll then pull that out in the morning or in the evening, depending on when I want to make my bread. Knock the air out, shape it, let it have its third proof, and then bake it. The reason you want to do the 3 rise is because you'll get a much softer dough over the longer term, and it just has a slightly better shelf life. The other things that will improve shelf life, if anyone's made the milk bread or the Boone, can't pronounce this properly. She'll pronounce it properly because I can never do that properly.
Tanchong.
Tanchong. So you'll see a tanchong bread. Essentially what it is, you're actually cooking some of the flour and some of the water and creating a roux, essentially. It's a little bit thicker. What happens is the gluten holds onto that water and it actually extends the shelf life of your buns. We're doing an Easter class towards the end of this month, and I'm going to be using that method for making the hot cross buns. So come back and watch that. I promise you, you'll love it. I used it for the first time last year in making our Greek tsourdekia, and the tsourdekia that I made on Monday were just as fresh when we had them on the Sunday. So that's how beautiful that tanchong method is in terms of extending shelf life. So I want to show you that method so you end up with beautiful hot cross buns that you can eat for days and days and days and days, and they will not dry out. So bread dough, cover, so use the right flour. Let's talk about yeast. I don't think it matters the brand, but I'm using something called instant dried yeast. Instant dried yeast literally goes in with all of the ingredients and gets kneaded together. You do not need to activate instant dried yeast. It will activate as soon as it hits that water and starts that process. If you buy dried yeast or you buy fresh yeast, you do need to feed that with either some flour and water. You do need to let that activate. So give it half an hour to an hour to start bubbling and doing its thing in some of that liquid that's going into your recipe. So you start that activation process. So no activation, dried yeast, fresh yeast, you do have to activate. Now the ratio for fresh yeast to dried is double. So if the recipe calls for, and I think this calls for 20 grams of dried yeast, you would use 40 grams of fresh yeast. So just double it.
Sorry, quick question.
Yes.
So with your yeast, you store that in the freezer, don't you?
That lives in the freezer for me, and I don't care about the expiry date. I mean, we use a fair bit. This was best before 24th of July 2020. Okay, and it's still good. I'll prove it when I bring my bread out. So I do not throw out. I actually bought a bulk pack of yeast, and I probably went through that first before I ended up starting using this one. So it's 2022, guys, and I'm still using the same yeast. So leave it in the freezer so that it extends the shelf life. Do not throw it out. In fact, it may not even be 2020. I might just have the container. Who knows? It doesn't matter. I've reused the container, Mandy. You'll be happy with that. What else? So on Mandy's YouTube channel, we've done some bread classes before. So I go through all of the things that I'm talking about now. You can obviously rewatch this video and you can rewatch that video to, I guess, understand bread and its intricacies. Okay, let's talk about enriched doughs. So we go from a basic, I guess, pizza dough essentially to something like a brioche where you're adding butter, you're adding a fair bit of fat into that mixture. You have to stretch, you have to develop the dough and get that window test. They talk about a window test. So basically you can't do it with this dough because it's too wet. But once you need that dough, you just kind of stretch it and you can actually almost read a newspaper through it. So that's what they call that window test. You need to get it to that point before you add any fat. If you're adding the fat too early, and this has literally a tablespoon, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about literally a block of butter that would go into a brioche. That butter actually goes around the gluten strands and it actually prevents the dough from rising. So that's why you have to develop the gluten first before adding fats. So make sure when you are doing a brioche, you do that window test. Now, I think that there's times when you'll need it for the 2 minutes and it's enough. You might need to need it for 4 minutes or 5 minutes just to make sure you get that adequate stretch. Oh, sorry, I'm getting Boone to keep an eye on the
How is that?
No, a bit longer. Longer. Yeah, longer.
Even it's so brown.
Yeah, no, darker. I want it darker. So you want it to, you want to make sure you get that window test before you add the fat. So that's really, really important. I can't remember. I don't know if you've got that sheet handy. I should have printed it off before we did it today. I was talking about bread improver. So bread improver, you can buy bread improver at the supermarket, and it does actually help extend shelf life. So use a natural preservative. You can also make your own, and I think it was a combination of salt. Oh yeah, I can't remember either. Too long ago. It was on one of the websites, I think on Luke website, but it's on the other video, and I'm sure if you're really curious, we can show you a way to make it yourself at home using another method. What else? Have I forgotten anything? Any questions? You can come off, certainly come off mute if you've got any questions.
I had a question. So I didn't realise that when you put the Glad wrap or your nice shower caps over there, that it didn't have to be on the surface. So just like that.
It'll actually stick if it's on the surface. So what you want it to do is be above, and literally it's just stopping air from going in to prevent the skin from creating. Otherwise, it will dry it out. Sorry, we should show the mat. Sorry, go back to the mat. On the mix shop, so I don't add more flour once the flour's in. You don't want to be adding more flour because you haven't developed the gluten in that flour. On the mix shop, Boone used this earlier. It's our mat. This is really good. You saw before I used water because the dough was so sticky, in order to make the dimples on the focaccia. You can use water, oil, spray a little bit of oil on your hands just to give you that ability to utilize or rub against a very sticky dough. I'm going to give me a little bit of that spray just to show, because this is quite sticky, and I just want to show you. If I try and work with this, like it's sticking everywhere, and people get really reluctant to work with a dough that's sorry, in here. I'm just going to get Boone to spray a little bit of this oil on my hands. And use this on the mat, use it on your hands. And what happens is that's now gliding. So I'm literally able to roll that around and around and around and around, and it's not sticking. So do that. Work with oil, a little bit of oil on your hands so that you're able to do that. If you're putting in more flour, remember it's undeveloped flour, and I want to show you this. I'm going to try and do a little bit of that window test we were talking about earlier. So see how that's tearing? To me, that tells me it's underdeveloped in terms of gluten, but I'm not too concerned because that overnight method actually helps me cheat a little bit. So it does a lot of that work for you. Initial rise overnight, fridge, then another rise. Yes. Sorry, Mandy's answered that.
Yes. There was another question from Michelle Moss. If you don't have a tin like that, what would you recommend to bake your focaccia? Yeah.
Anything. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to have a little bit of height. That's it. So focaccia's ready.
That looks incredible.
Yep. And it's risen pretty well. We're going to slice it up. We'll share some photos a little bit later. But that was really quick and easy. And it is something I would do, for sharing around for an evening, when you've got some cheese and salami and other bits and pieces. Your typical, I guess, Mediterranean, like a cheese board type arrangement. So I think that would be really, really nice. Any other questions? How long can it stay in the fridge for the second proof? Anywhere up to 3 days. So I actually do that method when I want to do what I call cheap sourdough. I don't really have the patience to be feeding a starter and going back and emptying and refeeding. All power to Boone because she does do it, and her breads are absolutely amazing. But when I want to have those sour flavors, what happens is the bread feeds on itself and it actually develops those aromas that you're getting. That should smell like, I don't know, what's the right term?
No, it is sour.
Yeah, it smells sour, but it shouldn't smell off. If it's gone off, you shouldn't be using it. So make sure it's covered. Make sure your containers are sterile, your plastic's sterile, so you're not introducing any nasty bacteria to it. But anywhere up to 3 days. And I then tend to mix that with a fresh batch if it's too sour, and then reuse and use that next lot. So you could literally have that in the fridge for 3 days, halve it, and then mix that into another batch if you wanted to. if you wanted to reduce that sourness, because it will go quite sour after 3 days, which is why they empty it, feed it, throw some away, and that process, anyone who's into all of that. Yeah, so as long as you need it to. So just give it the adequate time it needs to come back to that room temperature. It will not stretch and open. It will just sort of come out and then shrivel back up if it's just not at that right room temperature. So just give it the time it needs. When I make the tsurekia, which is essentially like a brioche dough for our tsurekia, that's exactly the process. So I end up making probably the equivalent of 6 to 8 batches in the Thermomix. Let that rise as one big batch that night. So I'll probably start that process around 6 o'clock. By about 10 o'clock, it's giving me that really good first proof. That all goes to bed in the fridge. First thing in the morning, I'm able to roll it out. If anyone's done brioche dough, as soon as you grab it, it's, it's stretching and you can't actually roll it into beautiful logs. You get the most awkward shapes because it stretches quite awkwardly. Whereas what happens in the fridge is that butter hardens and then you're able to roll it out into beautiful logs and get the shapes that you're looking for. So the fridge is actually a really good way to help you get the right shape for your breads and your tsurekia and whatever else you're doing. Any questions? No?
Yes,
I might go and find that sheet.
Irene.
If you want to cover something else off, I'm going to go and find that sheet.
Hang on, Michelle Moss had a question, I think.
Yes, please.
No, I was being cheeky. I said, what's your address? I want to pop round.
Oh, come over. Yeah. Yeah, I'll text you. Come over. Boone and I can't possibly eat it all ourselves.
I can.
I'm going to find that sheet, Mandy. If you want to cover off something else on the Thermomix while I do this.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't have a Thermomix.
I'm going to find that sheet. Sorry, just bear with me.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to very quickly then show you that recipe that Boone did. As I said, you can now upload that into Cookie-Doo. So I'm coming back into Cookie-Doo. And I did do that before. I walked in the door from work about 20 minutes before we started. So I haven't had a chance to do anything with it apart from upload it. But when you come into the Cookie-Doo 3.0 with the created recipes, you come in here and here you are. You can see I've just uploaded it. So I literally went into the recipe community. It gives you an option down the bottom, towards the bottom of the recipe to upload to Cookie-Doo. And here it is. So there is a little bit of work to be done on it, and I'm not going to do it all now, but just when it comes in like this, you do have to fiddle around a little bit in that you're better off having these in different, hang on, I'd have to edit it first. Here we go, edit. All right, so I would, where is it, 2? I would put that down there. So that's number 2. I would put this one down there, number 3, number 4. So it's just literally putting it into all the steps like that. 7, 8, 9. Okay. And then you'd go back and you'd have to do a few, heat on 50 degrees. You basically, hang on, I've got myself all in a muddle here, but here we go. Heat on 50 degrees for 3 minutes. So I would come in here as a cooking session, whatever you call it. And I would go, I'm going on for how many? 50 seconds. Oh no, 3 minutes. Okay, I put 3 in there. I would have I need my temperature on. So I'm going to go on to, hang on, my speed. It takes a little bit of fiddling around this. I think as you do more and more of them, then you get better at it. But it's also really good to do it, I find, near your Thermomix, so you can go onto the Thermomix and just watch the steps as you're going through. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, has done that. But basically, that means now I'm going to get rid of this little bit of writing afterwards there. And when I put speed 3 instead of speed 1. Anyway, you get the idea. So basically you go in there and you add those bits in. Then those things are going to actually show up on the screen of your Thermomix. So that's a really, really quick cheats way, well, little bit of a taster of Cookie Dough 3.0. It is fantastic. You know, if you've got some really nice recipes of yours or ones that you love, I can show you a beautiful recipe, which I've got in here, hang on, confirm that, get out of there. It's always confusing when you're trying to get out. Oh, hang on, I think I just have to, done. There we go. So one of the recipes I've got in here is Michelle Moss's nut butter dip, because that's a favorite. And look how long it's been there. She's had a TM31 at the time when she made it. And I've got to do a bit of work on that too, but it's wonderful. So some of those favorite recipes you can just upload and add in. All right, Irene, it looks like you might have your...
Yep, I did.
Wonderful.
I did.
Excellent.
So we did this bread making workshop a lifetime ago, it feels like. So there's a lot of tips on that worksheet, which if you want to see it, just let your consultant know. We'll share it around. But right down the bottom, I've got lots of tips to ensure that you get good results. Okay, so bear with me. Sorry if I'm looking down, but let's go through some. So one is don't burn the yeast. So activating yeast with warm water is important to get things moving along, but when the water is too hot, you will kill the result, basically resulting in a bread that won't rise. The ideal temp is between 32 and 38. And the longer you need your dough in the Thermomix is creating what I call friction heat. So hence the reason I use tepid water. I do not bring my water up to that 37 degrees, because if you're going to mix that for a good 5, 10, 15 minutes, and I can, when I do my tsurekia, I'm kneading that dough for a good 10 to 15 minutes. I go for a longer period. That constant mixing, you'll actually feel it. The dough, the blade gets hotter and the dough gets hot. And that's the reason I simply take the chill out of the water when it goes in. If you go and read all this stuff up on the internet, you'll find that a lot of the professional bakers, they actually measure temperature water based on how long they're going to put it in the mixer. They add mixing time to then calculate the temperature of the water that has to go in the bowl to ensure that they don't kill the yeast. So I'm giving you the easiest way to do it: tepid water every single time, mix it through, and I promise you won't kill the yeast. We talked about a wet dough and using oil on your hands, on your surface, on your mat to ensure that it doesn't stick. The rising of the three times for a longer lasting tender bread. And the fact that I love to use, I use the refrigeration process a lot because, we're all a bit time poor. We talk about allowing, you'll often read, allow dough, to double in size before, that's what your test is to know stuff is ready. I don't use that method. Yes, it works for the most part, but the problem is if you allow your dough to proof too much, it actually, as you pop it in the oven, those gases escape too quickly and it starts to flatten. So instead of having a dough that rises, it actually goes the other way, or essentially can even sink and give you that kind of way down the bottom in the middle. So the right test in terms of, and this isn't the right way to test it, but when I look at the dough and I push down, you want to see a little bit of spring back. If it's sinking all the way down, your dough's overproofed, and honestly just bake it for the sake, because you're going to lose it. You don't want it to go too far. If you're pressing it down and it's springing back too quickly, then it's underproofed. So too quick, underproofed, springing back slowly, perfect, pushing down and staying down, it's way over. So it's good to test it.
This is quite a good test. You do it.
No, it's not too early. But no, it's probably not a way.
Yeah, sure.
If you see it on here, see how that's, this is too soft. It's not really the ideal test. You wanted to do it on a proof dough. But anyway, you'll get the idea. Okay. So we talk about, I'll find that. I've got a, sorry, I do have one. Here it is. This is not off the mix shop, but you can get these off the mix shop. So we talk about the scoring blades. So if you are doing bread, then ideally when you're doing a loaf, you need to allow it to expand or release those gases. So you'll often see those cuts that they do on the beautiful specialty breads, and they're using the lame. They're using essentially a really sharp blade in order to cut, in order for those gases to go somewhere. So definitely definitely worthwhile investing in. And the one on the mix shop's quite pretty. So I've had mine for years. So get the one from mix shop. It's really, really
Irene,
nice.
I think, Robin, have you got a question? No?
No.
No.
Oh, hands up. I think she's saying she wants the, I think she's saying she also wants this list of instructions. It's worth its weight in gold. Okay, so the next thing is about steam. So I have a steam oven. I'm really blessed to have a steam oven. They're pretty expensive to get a steam oven. So when I'm baking bread, we love the Italian crusty, thick crust bread. So for me, I incorporate steam when I'm cooking my bread, because what that does is it creates that steam around the outside of the bread and it creates that thick crust. So I love doing that. Now, if you want soft rolls, you don't use steam. So you just use a basic oven, no steam functionality. So with steam, you're going to get crust. Without the steam, you will not get that thick crust. So it's good for softer rolls. The other thing that's really good for soft rolls is exactly what Boone's done with hers. So you'll see how, sorry, Boone, I'm going to eat it anyway. How squishy and tender they are. That's because she's used milk powder. So again, you'll see that when I do the hot press bun. So hopefully I'll see you all for that class, and we'll send out we'll let you know today. I think it's on the 31st. Is it the 31st, Annie?
It is.
It is. Okay, come back on the 31st. Okay, so steam. Okay, storing in the freezer, as I said, don't worry about the use by date. We've talked about the doubling of the fresh yeast. Oh, and something, again, it's a tip. If you want to do, I'm going to show you this because they're all perfect. Even though Boone cut them as scrolls and measured her for 12, look how perfect they are. I use scales. So I use the scales on the Thermomix. So I actually weigh the entire batch of dough, and then I divide it into, if I'm doing bread rolls, I divide them evenly. So they all end up the same size. So you do need to weigh them to be able to do that. What else have we got in here? Whoops. Sugar. Okay, now sugar is important. You don't need to add a lot. Something as simple as a teaspoon. It actually feeds the yeast. It will also add colour. So what you'll notice is, obviously, Boone's put sugar on top of hers. So you've got that gorgeous caramelisation happening. Mine's darker because I've added the oil. So the oil has given me that colour. If I didn't put the oil on there, I'd end up with a fairly blonde looking loaf. Sugar does that. So it actually adds, obviously, a colour to the crust, a little bit of flavour, and also feeds the yeast. So 1 teaspoon, by all means, use a 0-calorie sugar. It's okay. It's just something to give it, to feed it. The bread improver, this is the bit I want to talk about before. Bread improver activates the gluten. It helps produce gas, which improves the process of the dough kneading and fermentation, which results in a lighter loaf and better texture and better keeping qualities. You can produce bread with that bread improver by using sugar and oil in its place. Sorry?
Slower.
Oh, sorry, that's the Greek in me. Okay, so sugar and oil can be used to replace bread improver, and the quantity is 3 teaspoons of sugar per kilo of flour and 30 to 40 mils of vegetable oil. So essentially you would swap out some of the water and replace that with the oil. And so we use half a kilo. I think there was no sugar in the focaccia recipe at all. But you could use that. I guess, this won't last long enough to sit around, so it'll be all right. Okay, there was a whole bunch of gluten-free notes, and I think we'll save that for the Sunday class, so you guys can come back for all of that. And there's some gorgeous stuff on buckwheat flour, coconut flour, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll send this around. So just leave some, again, just contact your consultant and we'll send this information around. Any other questions before Boone and I hoe in?
I already honed in on one of my coconut rolls.
Yeah, one of the
I couldn't wait.
It's so funny.
Anyone else got any questions? It's amazing. Amazing. So pretty.
Let's cut it. Let's see what it looks like inside, hey? Boone's been looking at it saying, when can I cut it? When can I cut it?
So just a question. So why are you using scissors?
Why? Because it's what I've got here.
Oh, okay.
Use a knife. So really lovely and light. You want to see a bit of the air bubbles inside.
Amazing.
So No, I've got some good
Yeah,
colour.
still
So this
steamy.
tin, because this is an aluminium tin, you're going to get that instant reaction in terms of the heat. So that's why I personally would never bake any bread in a glass container. It doesn't allow you to crisp up bread. This is, I don't know, it's a really cheap, like it's a very tinny aluminium tray. So it's very, very thin. So you're getting that instant reaction with the heat. So I think just go and find, go down Victoria Street. I guess it depends where everybody lives. Maybe we can ask Boone's Italian customer to bring back, a few dozen from Italy for us the next time he's there. But it actually cooks really, really well. But it's a very cheap, basic tin, so it does the job. But if you've got any sort of aluminium tray and it's really tender inside, here you go, Boone. Thank you. I won't let her wait anymore. That's so funny.
Okay, any other questions from anybody whilst we've got these bread gurus in front of us?
I use fishing wire to cut my scrolls. Yeah, I use dental floss. So you can use whatever you've got. The fishing wire is great. Fishing wire would be a good option.
Fantastic. Thank you, ladies. You are amazing. Is it possible to cook on a flat tray, or do you need the dish?
No, the dough's too wet, so I think it'll spread. So it needs something to kind of stop it from, I guess, spreading out too much. It's not too bad. Like, it didn't go too far, but I think you'll end up with, you won't be consistent.
Look, at the very worst, you can use, say, a lemon tray if you haven't got any other trays to use.
Do you want to tell everyone how it tastes?
So it tastes really yum. The feta cheese and the olive on it is really, really good.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Harry.
There's also a question about about freezing it and would it freeze?
Yeah, I can't see why not. I think this one would reheat pretty easily because it's quite a light loaf. So I actually see, yes, absolutely. I reckon you could definitely freeze this one. I think it will also depend on what's on it, obviously. So yeah, please share some pictures. Really simple recipe. I've been talking for, I don't know, half an hour or so. It's kind of halfway there, but it's really cold in here. We've got the aircon on because we figured it's really hot, and we're baking, with the oven on, so it's going to be a little bit too. But with I did that outside tonight. I let it proof outside. Oh, some proofing tips, actually. This is a good one we should add. Some people put water into their bowl, so bring that up to boil and sit their bread inside the varoma to help it proof. Boone likes the car option, so the car is always hot for some reason. So even in winter, it's a good place to pop your bowl in. What else? In the dryer, I've heard. Anyone else got some tips on how they proof their dough through winter?
In a thermoserver?
Yeah, well, of course, the thermoserver.
Or just a very hot.
God, I hope not. Anyway, if it did look like fun and you'd like to become part of the team, we'd love to have you. So just get in contact with your consultant. We do learn so much from each other. And as I said, we're extremely lucky to have these girls with their knowledge on bread. We've got Pearl, who's a wonderful source of information about curries. A few people gluten-free and a whole lot of stuff. So it is a really good way to learn a lot about your Thermomix and just about food in general. So thank you all very much for coming along today. Thanks, Boone and Irene, for your time. And it looks like you had a lot of fun anyway.
It is. I'm still stuffing my face.
Yeah.
That's good. Guys, so just be careful. No different to obviously overheating or getting the temperature above with the water. It's the same when you're proofing it. So I read someone who puts it on top of the heater. Be really careful because that will kill the yeast as well. So you don't want it to be too hot that you're going to kill the yeast. So you want to keep that temperature sort of below 38 degrees.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I'll send out an email with all the information in it and the links to the bread class, our gluten-free bread class and the Easter. So you can come back and learn how to make the hot cross buns.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks, girls. Well
Bye.
done.